We actually have 5 hard drive images from 5 counties in 2020 that were Dominion hard systems, and in all 5 of them, and I released this yesterday on Emerald, but I got permission to release this incidentally. So this is big news, and that is on the 5 that we examined, that we found something, and I'm confident to say they're going to find it in Fulton, Georgia. And that is, there's something called the DLLs in a computer system. That's the, I don't want to get too dolphin speak on you. It's a library of tools. So there's a great metaphor to explain it. Think of a big auto repair shop with 10 different cars and 10 different bays and a different mechanic working on each car. There's one big tool set that they all run to and grab whatever tool they need at the moment and then return. Computer systems, these have that. It has a library of these tools, and the different programs that are running just go and access this one shared toolbox. That's your DLL, your library, digitized link library, I think it stands for. And that, if it has one change after certification, that invalidates the whole system, because it's just the point you want to bury a hidden script or you want to bury some hidden instructions. If you can slip it in there, that can be a recipe that does a mountain of work all over the place, runs all these different. So it's really important that be pristine. And once the system is certified, any change there destroys instantly invalidates the system. We have found an average of 500 changes after certification in the 5 machines we have found, one of them at 1,000. We're pretty comfortable that they're going to find that in Fulton. And what that means is that system, even Dominion and associated people will acknowledge one change in that after certification invalidates the entire system for the election. And we have found an average of 500 insertions and changes. These things are all cooked. It's all so pre-cooked, and that's the place where sort of the cooking is stored. The other thing they will have found is there's 148,000 ballots in special segregated storage by judicial order. And those 148,000 ballots, there's a dozen affidavits that say the same thing. They are 93% Biden, 7% Trump. Every circle is perfectly filled in, like a computer, not a human. And they're mail-in ballots, but there's not a crease in any of them, and they're all together. So which is impossible because mail-in ballots have to be folded. If you assume those were all fake, you could do the math. That means there are 148,000, about 10,000 were for Trump, 138,000 were for Biden, which means there was 128,000 of pro-Biden spread cooked into that little apple pie.
Right.
Well, there's 128,000 cooked into it. Trump only lost by 11,000 votes. 128 of them were that stack. So that's something they could check in 5 minutes. They got there. Remember those pictures of Tulsi standing outside?
Oh, yeah.
I would bet long odds she was calling the president and saying something like, Mr. President, I've put my eyes on these famous 148. That alone, that set of facts I just told you alone, completely overthrows the Georgia election. Before you even get to, there were 70,000 ballots with no images. And I mean, there's images, but no paper. And there's another 17,000 of other ballots with no paper, but just the images. And there's foreign connectivity, and there's this, that, and all this happy horse shit. And all these different places you lose, it's just a mountain. But the thing that you could see in 5 minutes in 2 minutes is just open up that one stack and look. And if those 148,000 are in fact uncreased mail-in ballots, as we've said, or is with perfectly filled in circles, you really have your whole answer right there. So my guess is that has something to do with why Tulsi was on site, because she could personally go and look at that and then call the president. There's only one person she was calling on her cell phone from that site.
Information about that, but clearly she was working on other stuff behind the scenes. She wasn't being excluded necessarily, but she was obviously working on this.
Yes, Tulsi's not on the outs from everything I hear. She is key, and she's the You gotta, as the old song goes, you gotta be a football hero if you want to go out with the beautiful girls. It's Tulsi's the football hero here. Tulsi has taken this to the end zone. There are others who could have, but this whole election integrity effort has been mounted. There's a team of the best under Tulsi who've gone in and ripped it apart and absorbed the mountains of information that were available from in all these states, the citizens, all these Garland Favorito folks in Georgia, you probably know people like that, fighting these for 4 years and just hang all the information that got surfaced through the lawsuits, the FOIAs, and so forth, as well as all this stuff from the Venezuelan defectors. It took a big team to absorb it all. Tulsi's really, I think, the hero of it. It also took a big brain to absorb it all. So she's not on the outs with anyone as far as I can tell. We got to see. I think that she's going to do something historic. My guess would be she's doing something historic at 3 p.m. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that that testimony from Sidney did not help Trump. Right. Because once she acknowledged that his own lawyers had told him it was lost, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. I was in the room. They never said that. They wouldn't take a position. They were all mealy-mouthed. That's why Flynn finally stood up and said, what are you saying happened? What do you think happened on November 3rd? They were all mealy-mouthed. They would not tell Trump. They never told Trump he had lost that I saw.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get back into that. Could clarify it. But just it gave you a sense of sort of the chaos and that Trump knew he lost, and he knew he lost for all these good reasons, but that he just couldn't get people around him to do what they wanted. And it got into the whole, controversy between her and I guess Rudy Giuliani. It's an interesting look into the chaos of the Trump administration in that in-between period between the election and January 6th. Of course, you were there. So if you want to start with that, how are you feeling about this here 5.5, 6 years later, that something's actually happening? I mean, this is exciting.
This is very exciting. We know what they're going to find. We're very confident they're going to find what we have found. We actually have 5 hard drive images from 5 counties in 2020 that were Dominion hard systems, and in all 5 of them. And I released this yesterday on Emerald, but I got permission to release this, incidentally. So this is big news, and that is on the 5 that we examined, that we found something, and I'm confident to say they're going to find it in Fulton, Georgia, and that is there's something called the DLLs in a computer system. That's the I don't want to get too dolphin speak on you. It's a library of tools. So there's a great metaphor to explain it. Think of a big auto repair shop with 10 different cars and 10 different bays and a different mechanic working on each car. There's one big tool set that they all run to and grab whatever tool they need at the moment and then return. Computer systems, these have that. It has a library of these tools, and the different programs that are running just go and access this one shared toolbox. That's your DLL, your library. Digitized Link Library, I think it stands for. And that, if it has one change after certification, that invalidates the whole system, because it's just the point you want to bury a hidden script or you want to bury some hidden instructions. If you can slip it in there, that can be a recipe that does a mountain of work all over the place, runs all these different. So it's really important that be pristine. And once the system is certified, any change there destroys instantly invalidates the system. We have found an average of 500 changes after certification in the 5 machines we have found. One of them had 1,000. We're pretty comfortable that they're going to find that in Fulton. And what that means is that system, even Dominion and associated people will acknowledge one change in that after certification invalidates the entire system for the election. And we have found an average of 500 insertions and changes. These things are all cooked. It's all so pre-cooked, and that's the place where sort of the cooking is stored to be brought out on election day, speaking metaphorically. So I'm pretty confident that they opened up these machines yesterday and they found that. I can tell you another thing I'm very confident they found. So they raided on Wednesday. They opened up on Thursday. On Friday morning, Tulsi's telling the National Association of Secretaries of State she wants to come talk to them. I'll tell you something else I'm pretty confident they found. Am I going on too long, Harrison? You want me to shut up?
I'm listening with rapt attention, sir. Go, please continue.
Okay. Well, first you want. Okay. The other thing they will have found is there's 148,000 ballots in special segregated storage by judicial order, and those 148,000 ballots. There's a dozen affidavits that say the same thing. They are 93% Biden, 7% Trump. They are, every circle is perfectly filled in, like a computer, not a human. And they're mail-in ballots, but there's not a crease in any of them, and they're all together. So if we, which is impossible because mail-in ballots have to be folded. If you assume those were all fake, you could do the math. That means there are 148,000, about 10,000 were for Trump, 138,000 were for Biden, which means there was 128,000 of pro-Biden spread cooked into that little pie, little apple pie.
Right.
Well, there's 128,000 cooked into it. Trump only lost by 11,000 votes. 128 of them were that stack. So that's something they could check in 5 minutes. They got there. Remember those pictures of Tulsi standing outside?
Oh, yeah.
I would bet long odds she was calling the president and saying something like, Mr. President, I've put my eyes on these famous 148. That alone, that set of facts I just told you alone, completely overthrows the Georgia election. Before you even get to, there were 70,000 ballots with no images. And I mean, there's images, but no paper. And there's another 17,000 of other ballots with no paper, but just the images. And there's foreign connectivity, and there's this, that, and all this happy horse shit. And all these different places you lose. I mean, it's just a mountain. But the thing that you could see in 5 minutes is, or in 2 minutes, is just open up that one stack and look. And if those 148,000 are in fact uncreased mail-in ballots, as we've said, or is with perfectly filled in circles, you really have your whole answer right there. So my guess is that has something to do with why Tulsi was on site, because she could personally go and look at that and then call the president. There's only one person she was calling on her cell phone from that site. She didn't have to report to anybody else, I'm sure. So it's broken for them. That's why these people are out there. Anyway, so those are two big things I'm confident they found.
Well, those are two huge things. And I got to admit, I'm trying not to get too excited because I've been a little bit down on Trump. I've sort of sparred with you because, but you know a lot more than I do. And I'm 100% so willing to eat all of my words. And I'm just trying not to get too excited because this sounds really big. This sounds like it could be a gigantic deal. And I'm so praying that it is. I mean, the secretaries of state were the people who did this, right? I mean, we covered it back in 2020. You had Jocelyn Benson and all these others, the 5 of the 5 states all coordinating with each other and talking about how they were getting, lawfare, funds ready to fight Trump if he tried to challenge the election. So, I mean, the fact that she's going to give a speech to the Secretary of State with Pam Bondi, I'm trying not to get too excited. Should I be excited, Patrick, or I mean, what do you think she's going to say?
I think at 3 p.m. I think that you should have somebody tuned in on there. Dare, I have this wonderful, my background person, Shannon, and I'll have her tuned in on this. She's in the background. She's sort of mission control in my life. You know that movie, The Accountant, where Ben Affleck is out doing crazy stuff and he's got this kind of artistic woman who sits it back in mission control. That's what I have in my life. I'll have her.
Everybody needs one of those. No, we'll go to it if it's is it 3 p.m. Eastern time?
Yes.
So we'll be on air at 2 p.m. Central when they go to give this speech to the secretaries of state. I'm extremely excited about that. So what else can you tell us about this raid? Why Georgia in particular? Pennsylvania was full of fraud. Arizona was full of fraud. Why has Fulton County in particular become the epicenter of all of this?
Well, I think what's happened, there's two different ways to explain it. One is there are prosecutions moving forward in the government. I'm not sure what's public and what isn't. So I think it's public that there are three grand juries impaneled in different places and looking at different aspects to things. This could have been triggered by one of them. It could also have been triggered directly, probably was, by Tulsi's own, she's had this working group of 20 people under her who were drawn, I think they're all patriots, and they were drawn from different parts of the three-letter agencies. And that group has really become an epicenter of absorbing everything that had to be absorbed, that all these citizens and citizen journalists and patriots had worked on, and our Venezuelans coughed up. So that could be why it was triggered. But it's interesting that it was Tulsi. You know, she does have, it means that their national security authority, it tells me that this is all moved out of the realm of law
enforcement, yeah.
law, and it's now understood as national security. We also noticed today, I think, the president declared a national emergency over Cuba. Let me tell you, this is really all Cuban. If you really want to know, this is freaking Fidel Castro's last gift to us. Fidel Castro always wanted to destroy the United States. This is the great Bolivarian dream. He cottoned on to this young army officer in Venezuela named Hugo Chavez, who was a bastard, whose father had not loved him, blah, blah, blah. And Fidel played that role and groomed him, got him to be this socialist, Bolivarian revolutionary who then, well, he tried to overthrow his country in 92 or 93. He then got out of prison 4 years later and got elected, and then immediately started jamming the Constitution, doing the Barack Obama. You know, some people view the Constitution as the rules of the game to which we all agree. We're all going to cooperate to the sense that we're going to follow those rules as we pursue our different visions of how to make our country better. But there are some people who, especially totalitarians, tyrants, see those constitutions as a set of handcuffs. They have this vision of what they want to do, and this constitution is a set of handcuffs. So they want to break it as soon as they got in. Hugo Chavez. Anyway, so that's what Hugo Chavez said. This really, ultimately, you got to say China has its role, Russia, Iran, they all have roles, and I'm sure they contributed, but ultimately this is the dream of Fidel Castro. And he got Venezuela conquered, and then they used the massive wealth of the minerals they've looted, we think, $2.7 trillion, maybe $4 trillion. This cartel did, as their own people they went. When I was there 7 years ago, there was not just starvation, it was cannibalism.
Yeah.
It was, so Fidel, this is actually, you got to think of Cuba and Venezuela as what we're up against here in our hemisphere, without going into the people behind the people. This has all been a Venezuelan-Cuban program, and it used to be Cuba was the big brother. Cuba really is the Venezuelan cartel has been chafing. Maduro was chafing at Cuba, like he no longer wanted to be the little brother. But anyway, this has really been a Cuban intelligence Venezuelan operation to overthrow our country for 2 decades. And they had some help from Russia and Iran and China and some funding and so forth. But this has really been a Cuban-Venezuelan dream to overthrow the U.S. And I'll close on this note. Everybody laughs at that in America because they see these guys as crummy little, banana republics. It's not true. Venezuela had immense wealth, and Cuba is Leninist. They're wonderful at espionage. They're wonderful at espionage, and they're masters of that. And it doesn't matter that their soldiers trained with broomsticks because they're so broke and stuff. None of that matters. What matters is they've penetrated, the Cuban intelligence has penetrated the U.S. and is really to blame for what happened.
Well, I'm not exactly surprised when you see the number of just openly communist people in this country who, see Cuba as an example of, success of the revolution. So, they probably have a lot of collaborators, willing to work with them here. So is it a coincidence that this occurred a few weeks after the Venezuela raid, or are these two things related in some way?
I think it's all deeply linked. It could well be that Trump's not. I know some things that were done that were actually acknowledged in that confession from Hugo Carvajal, the military intelligence chief who's sitting in prison, acknowledged a bunch of things that are so damaging to the national security of the United States that Cuba was part of. And so this was, in fact, all a plan. Then hitting us with COVID, these BLM people, they were trained down in Venezuela. They were given 10 million bucks and such. They were, this has been a communist program driven by those folks to destabilize our society. I think COVID was part of that. And it was all to position us to jam down this fake election. And then we got to this crazy phase of normalization where suddenly Americans were told for the first time in our lives, there's such a thing as misinformation and disinformation, and we're going to be able to censor you and all this crazy stuff we never thought. And the judiciary just went along with it all. The judiciary just went along with all. This is a Maoist, this is a very all of society revolution, people's revolution, every level of society at once, they were ready. So even though this was all blatantly unconstitutional, any lawyer who picked up a pen suddenly has Project 65 come after them,
right,
and say, to get them disbarred. So basically lawyers backed away. This was all a carefully plotted Bolshevik revolution. A bunch of dirty Bolsheviks overthrew the United States, and they succeeded for 4 years.
And we
were never supposed to get it back. We were never supposed to get a second chance,
I really am glad to know that Trump is making the most out of this, because you're exactly right. And the funny thing about it is that the left can't even come up with reasons to oppose it. They're saying, well, this is about Trump wants to cancel the midterms, or he's just mad that it, but it's like they really have nothing. I mean, you could, they can take the ICE stuff out of context, but they really got nothing. You got to give up the evidence. And if they didn't do anything wrong, then the evidence would prove that out. So clearly, you don't try to hide evidence if you haven't done something wrong. I mean, what comes from this, Patrick? Where do we go from here? Is everybody going to get arrested? Do we undo Biden's administration? I don't even know how we handle this. If it's really just proven incontrovertibly in court officially that they stole the election, what happens next?
Boy, there's so many things that have to be filed. The thing is that we have probably a couple dozen senators in the same position. They know, the whole establishment knows about this. Republicans are in on it, Democrats are in on it, governors, all of them know this. I shouldn't say all of them. There's a bunch of them in on this. Governor Kemp, I'm in Florida, the Governor Kemp next door in Georgia, Raffensperger, those guys were all part of this. Secretaries of State were part of it. That's where the first place that got captured, because the Secretaries of State really are in charge of the elections. So this was an overthrow of the United States of America. This was World War III. All these Americans who have wondered, your generation, we never got we were not the great generation because we didn't get our chance. This was the chance. This is World War III, and you've acquitted yourself beautifully, Harrison, I'll add. But this is World War III, and it was just done in a way that Americans weren't too familiar with.
Well, it still seems like it's happening under the surface. I always use the imagery, it's like the bubbles rising to the top, like something's happening under the water. I can't quite tell, but you get the picture of Tulsi around the corner and you get these little hints, and it's like something big is moving beneath the surface. I really can't wait to find out what it is. And again, I'm going to be so happy to eat all the words I ever said about doubting Trump. I'm so ready for that. And he seems to be making that point too. Did you see his Truth Social post today? It has Alex and it had Owen Schroyer. It might have had me in there, but it's Trump saying, chill out, relax, let him cook. You panicins or, want this to happen too fast. I mean, I would love for that to be true. And he does seem to be signaling that. What's next? What should we be looking for? Are there going to be other raids on other places, or is it all going to start with Fulton County and grow out from there? What's going on behind the scenes here?
Well, that video actually took a slap at Flynn and me as well. And my answer, first, I'm told that a guy named Dilley in the White House, who does good video work, but he seems to always be wanting to slap at Flynn. I'm told that Trump may not even have seen that video. That some of the stuff getting posted he doesn't even, he's posting a lot but this guy Dilley made that video, and he seems to maybe be on someone's payroll to take slaps at Flynn. And my answer, what it says is, that we said that he would stay president. Well, he had to do what we were suggesting he do. He had to lift a finger to stay president. He had to do what he just did 2 days ago. He had to go actually in under his authorities, and raid that, and he had the authority to. Under stuff Obama had signed, he had the authority to. And that's what we were there to tell him. And you know what's weird? that's another misstatement of Sidney's. So I don't mean to pick a fight with Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell and I are never going to go on a camping trip together. She's been very public, as she was several years ago. We're not friendly. I walked away from her, as did a bunch of people, after working with her for 1 week. And so there's no love lost between Sidney and me. I mean, in March, in Defend the Republic. I don't want to let sleeping dogs lie, I feel. However, that video is very concerning to me because she said two things that helped the prosecution, and neither of them were true from what I observed. Now, she may have been part of other conversations where Pat Cipollone and the other lawyers were saying, Mr. President, you lost, you lost, you lost. I was in that famous 4.5 hour conversation. One of the nauseating things about it is they would say, take no such position. They absolutely did not take that position. They took the position that they wouldn't take, they were just mealy-mouthed until finally at one point, General Flynn sort of popped up. I described it in my book, and very gently, we were also flabbergasted. He very gently said, so what are you saying, Pat? What is it you think happened on November 3rd? Could we get clear about that? And Pat Cipollone mealy-mouthed, waffled, and then he finally said, well, sir, I'm not your, Mr. President, I'm your White House attorney, not your campaign attorney. So this mealy-mouthed nothing burger. So it's very strange that Sidney Powell would have told the DOJ that actually that they told Trump, because that was a key element in prosecuting President Trump, Do you understand why?
Yeah, and the way the lawyers were asking the question, they were clearly trying to elicit that answer.
Yeah, well, to charge Trump with insurrection, they had to maintain that his state of mind was he had lost and was cooking up all this other stuff. So it helps them very much for Sidney to have said, yes, those three lawyers told Trump that he lost. It helped them bring charge, it helped them cook that stuff up against Trump. And it's especially disturbing to me because I was in the entire 4.5 hour conversation. And that's just flatly untrue. They never took that position. Now, like I say, maybe there were some other positions they were talking about, some other meetings. I don't know the whole day, and there was something else she just said. Besides that, she just said something else that was not at all true in that little clip we saw.
Well, that's very well. I'm sorry for showing the audience things that weren't true. I just thought it was interesting because we were sort of speculating.
It's not your fault. It's Sidney's fault. Sidney was saying stuff. What I'm suggesting is Sidney was saying stuff that helped the prosecution.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, but no, it's key that it's amazing to me that I've never seen that clip. It's absolutely false, and I was in the room.
Wow.
Not that she would say that, but no, what is key is that the other stuff being said, everything that we were saying 5 years ago is bubbling up. Yeah, I think you can assume that there's other Atlantas. I don't know. You want me to you take the last minute. What else do you want to know?
Oh, I'd love to get more into that. I mean, can you stay with us for the the rest of the hour?
Sure. Let me give you another 45 seconds to tell you what's really been happening behind the scenes. Where some people all year have been telling Trump, we got to find the guy who's going to grab it, who's going to come forward and says, yes, it was me. I rigged the 2020 election. And those were more like people who had never actually prosecuted anyone. A lot of smart people, a lot of smart lawyers, but they never prosecuted anybody. The prosecutor involved who knows this stuff, his name is Stephanie Lambert, and she's been saying, no, just go in, and there's all these different places where they broke the law, where they destroyed records, they did this, that. Just arrest them for that, start grinding them, and work your way up like every other prosecution that ever occurred in history. Let's just try that. Well, finally, they got fed up and they did that. I think that might be part of what's happening.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. More on the other side, folks. Don't go anywhere.